Hi! This is kind of a new video for my channel, but I wanted to recap the books I read this year in 2024. It's a little late, but I saw YouTubers like Steph Borer and Kate Lee going over their favorite books of the year, and I wanted to too. Spoiler alert, there's only 9. um, with the end of senior year and the start of college, I didn't read as much as I'd like to, but I really enjoyed all of these books and I wanted to talk about them on here. So let's hop right into it. The first one, these are ranked, but the first one I'm gonna set apart because it's very different from the rest of the books. That doesn't mean I enjoyed it any less, but it's just very different. So for my Old Testament class this semester, I read the entire Old Testament. So this was like really interesting to me. I had never read the entire Old Testament, especially not in order like that. So it was really interesting to learn about God through that and see him working through his people Israel through thousands of years. And I thought that was really cool, especially leading up through December to Christmas, seeing all the things that lead up to that, especially the prophets towards the end, announcing God's birth, helped to get me excited too, which was nice. So that one's not part of my ranking, but it was great. I loved it. It took a really long time and a lot of reading. But yes, okay. So on the very bottom of my list, number 8 is The Summer I Turned Pretty. This was a reread for me. This is probably my 3rd or 4th time reading it. I love this book. I love this book so much. It's so cheesy. It's so teenage girl. It's so rom-com. I loved it, but it's on the bottom of my list just because it doesn't really fit with anything else. But it's a good, just like, I don't want to think, I just want to read something like fun kind of book. All right. That I'd recommend is really good, and the rest of the series is good. The TV show is good. Jenny Han, I love you, Jenny Han. And then my next one is The Messianic Message. This was a book that I read also for my Old Testament class. It was super interesting, and it's a really great companion when you're reading the Old Testament. It helps kind of dive in to what you're reading, and I'm not that smart, at least not in the Bible category. So this, Lessing and Steinman, the 2 authors, they do a really good job of just like making it palatable and like helping you understand like what is to be garnered from the Old Testament. I really enjoyed it. It's short, the font is big, and it's just like, it's very helpful, I think. Then we have The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. I thought this one was really good. There are some mature themes, but you know, it's a book that came out in 2023 or maybe 2024. I don't know. Very new book, so it's gonna have some of those things in it. So sad. It's like a very like poignant look at this family, this indigenous Nova Scotian family living in Maine / kind of Canada for part of the book. I won't spoil too much, but it's about separated siblings that grow up not knowing, you know, each other like are alive or exist, and the kind of grief and like separation that this girl grows up without knowing like her background or her culture. And also just like life in the 60s and family members with mental illness. It's very like rich, and Peters like writes with such like intelligence and like emotion, and it's very interesting. I enjoyed it a lot. You know, if you can get past some like iffy stuff, then I would recommend it. It's pretty good. My 5th favorite book I read this year was Let Me Tell You What I Mean by Joan Didion. So if you know me, then you know that I'm really getting into Joan Didion this year, or I was getting into Joan Didion for 2024. I love Joan. She's probably my favorite author. Her tone is just so unique and complex, and the way she looks at things is so interesting. I think she's just mind-blowing. I wish I had that much talent for anything. But Let Me Tell You What I Mean is her very last book. She died, I think, in 2021, maybe 2020. And this was published, I think, posthumously in 2021. And it's a collection of essays she wrote from like 1968 to like 2000, I think. And it's interesting, and each essay is like looking into a microscope at that time and the culture and like what was going on in her life. Some of them are about her, some of them are reviews of like different literature, some of them are about like the 70s and the 60s as a whole. Very, very interesting. The ones that I really enjoyed, I mean, I enjoyed all of them, but the ones that stood out to me were Alicia and the Underground Press. That one's about the Underground Press in like LA and New York. I thought it was really interesting because I hadn't heard of this, but it was kind of about the counterculture and like these like wacky underground newspapers that would report on like the weirdest stuff and the ads and all the articles in there, and it was really interesting and something I was not well versed in, but I could connect some of it to things that I learned in my AP US history class somehow. I thought it was very interesting. If you're looking for a good like introductory Didion essay to like kind of get her style but also her humor, I thought that one was pretty good. I liked On Being Unchosen by the College of One Choice. It's all about like her like being a young teenager, kind of like headstrong, and really like being like, if I'm gonna be a writer, I need to go to, I think it was USC, or no, maybe it was Berkeley. I don't know, one of those like really hard to get into California schools. And all of her friends get in, and she really wants to go, and she thinks she won't be a writer if she doesn't go to this exact school, which obviously we know, Jolie Tess being a writer, but she doesn't get in. All about like how she like dealt with that, and she came to terms with it, but also like her initial disappointment in that. She's funny, but she's also very kind of direct. She's very like, tell it how it is, you know. Another one I liked, I've got two more from that one. Another essay I liked was Pretty Nancy, kind of a profile of Nancy Reagan. Like not when Ronald Reagan was president, I think just before when he was governor of California. It's kind of from her time working as a journalist. Dane's not Nancy's. Dane's time working as like a journalist. She's like observing Nancy and kind of like the role Nancy led as like a mother and like hostess, and her like contributions to her husband's career. I thought that was really interesting. And the final one that I liked, Let Me Tell You What I Mean, was Why I Write. And this one was just a bit, I mean, it's kind of a, I won't say cliche, but it's like kind of a common thing for writers to be like, this is why I write. And Didion, she kind of puts her own spin on it, as she does everything, and she is so interesting, and she's so unique, and her reasons are just like very interesting. I aspire to be an English teacher, and I would love to share this one with my students someday because it's just so fascinating, and her mind works in such interesting ways. My next book, I think this is number 3. We got 3 left, is Sense and Sensibility. Sorry. It was my first time reading a Jane Austen novel, somehow. I think most people go in with, like, Pride and Prejudice, but I was interested, I don't remember why. I read it for the AP test, AP literature exam. It was, like, one of my preparation books that I read independently. I think it was on maybe a list or something of ones you should read. It was just so good. It's very romantic, but it's also just so well written. You feel like you're there in like a foggy English countryside with the girls. It's impeccable. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I think it's just one of those books that you need to experience for yourself. I need to read more Jane Austen soon. I get kind of lazy, but yeah. I can't recommend it enough. It's so good. My second to last book is The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This one, instead of being essays like a lot of her other nonfiction works, it's more of a memoir, I'd say. And again, it's so interesting. It's about her life in a span of just like 2-ish years, I think, losing first her husband, which is just so tragic, and then her daughter, and which don't let this description turn you off from reading it. It's really good, but it's very, very sad, but it's also like kind of hopeful, because you kind of go along with her as she processes this grief and these terrible things that have happened to her in such a short time frame. And the way that she addresses this time in her life is so unique, and it's unlike anything else I've ever read dealing with the topic of grief. And it just kind of changed my perspective on some things. I thought it was really good. I don't want to give away too much, but it is like, you know, it's her life. So it's just very interesting to hear this like from her perspective. And it's, obviously her husband was also a very, very famous writer. His name was John Donne. So you also get a little bit of insight into him, because I think he wrote primarily fiction. So you don't get as much about him through his writing. I've never read him. I've just like heard about him through John's books, but you get kind of an insight into like him and who he was behind the pen. I can't recommend that one enough. It's very good. There's some strong subjects in there, but I think it's worth a read. It's one of those that I think everybody should read at least once in their life. And then my favorite book of 2024 was Willa Cather's My Antonia. This was so good. I am like a recently converted Willa Cather fan. In high school, I don't know, maybe lit class, we were talking about Willa Cather, and I was like, ugh, we're only talking about Willa Cather because we live in Nebraska and we have to because she's from Nebraska. I get it now. I went into this book reluctant. I read it on my own time. It wasn't for class or anything. It was just unbelievable. It was fantastic. The way she paints not only the main character's life, but the lives of the people around her, who the Antonia's family, who are immigrants. The way she paints their life and their culture and the other people around them, and the main character, his kind of adolescence into a young man, growing up, and his like feelings and his ideologies changing, university, becoming a writer, stuff like that. It's fiction, but it feels like almost like just a tad bit autobiographical. You can sense Willa Cather through everything she does. Through all of the characters, you get little pieces of her, which I think is really interesting. I'm not sure what I'll read next, so if you have any suggestions for me to add to my TBR to read next, let me know in the comments. I loved making this video, so let me know if you want any more book YouTube videos. I really enjoyed making it, so I hope you have a great 2025 and you accomplish all your reading goals. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!